Hi, I'm Dana, and I do a lot of research about autism on the internet, which means every now and again I end up going down little rabbit holes that lead me to the wrong part of the internet, where I end up with all of the autism mommies and daddies talking about their poor sweet angel children, and it saddens me mostly every time. I talk quite often about things that frustrate and anger me or annoy me, and it's one of those where those feelings are definitely there, but it mostly makes me sad. Because I think that these are people who are genuinely trying to do their best for their children, they love their kids to absolute bits. And they just, in my opinion, have been guided in the wrong direction and aren't necessarily doing all the right things. And that being said, I'm not a parent, I'm just an autistic person that was once a child, and all of my thoughts and opinions come from being an autistic kid and thinking, oh well, actually I'd have really liked if people had done this, or if someone had done that, or if this had been done. So I don't know what it's like to parent a kid. I can only imagine it's incredibly difficult. That's why I've not popped one out, it looks hard. So I'm really trying to come into this without any judgment, as much as I do get very annoyed and frustrated by certain types of parents. Of course, as with everything, every autistic person, every autistic child, every autistic anyone is different from the last autistic person or child or anyone else. Not sure what else there is that's autistic, but I'm keeping it diverse, I guess. We're all different, we're all having different experiences, different traits, different sensory needs, so on and so forth. There is no one-size-fits-all guide, So this is very much just my experience and my thoughts. There's no research to back it up. I haven't got a kid. It's very much just is what I reckon, okay? So my first big one is to take their sensory needs seriously, because that's one of the main things that frustrates me with a lot of parents that I see, is that if their kid's in the supermarket sobbing, they assume that they're having a temper tantrum, they assume that they're being naughty, they assume that they just need to learn to behave. When the truth of it is, chances are there's some sort of sensory issue going on, and that's why they're having a meltdown. I think it's the type of situation that's easy for someone looking at the situation. It's very easy for me to be like, it's too bright and it's too noisy, give the kid some sunglasses and earphones and he's going to be good as gold. It's easy for me to say that when I'm not the person trying to do a shop to feed the family while the kid's screaming and the other kid needs something, and there's loads going on for me as well. Parenting looks incredibly difficult, and I think it's very, very easy to be able to look at it as an outsider and be like, oh well, you just need to do this. And that's very much what it is a lot of the time. Whenever I see these videos of kids having meltdowns and their parents being like, oh, he's being naughty again, how do we make this stop, why is he doing this? 9 times out of 10, I can pretty easily see the cause, and it's usually some sort of sensory issue. Obviously, that mostly applies to kids with higher support needs. For kids like me, with quite low support needs, that probably applies more to things like my mum was constantly putting me in fucking hats. My mum loves a hat, bless her. So from the age of birth till I was about 8 or 9, she was constantly trying to put me in hats, winter hats, caps in the summer, little sun hats, hairbands. She was just putting shit on my head, and she found it so funny that as a baby I'd tear it off and rip it into the road, and as a younger child when I was 6 or 7, I'd just take it off. I'd just refuse. I was like, no, I don't like it, I don't want to wear it. And it was always the assumption that I didn't care about sun protection, or I didn't care about being warm. And it's like, no, I'd love to be warm, but the sensory feeling of something on my head is disgusting. And it's things like that that may not be seen as sensory needs, but they very much are, and they should be understood and accepted and accommodated to, which brings me to my next point. It's again very easy for an outsider to look in and say it, but accommodate to your kid. It will make your kid happier, and it will make your life easier. Say you have 2 children and your autistic kid's constantly set off by the other kid screaming or being loud or singing or whatever else that kids just do. Rather than punishing the autistic kid for having a meltdown over that, or rather than punishing your other kid for making the noise that's caused the meltdown, soundproof their room. Take them outside, but soundproofing their room would be my first protocol, because it's not that expensive and it's pretty damn easy. Little things like that are gonna make the whole family dynamic better. It's gonna make your life easier. You're not gonna have to listen to your kid screaming or singing or whatever it is they do as often, and your kid that's autistic isn't gonna be having meltdowns. And again, for a personal experience where my parents really nailed it, as a kid I had one of those beds that was lifted and had a lot of space underneath. And I had this like obsession with pulling like all of my pillows and my blankets and stuff to sleep underneath this bed. I liked it being all contained and I felt like I was safe, and it was, you know, it was very nice for me. I enjoyed it as a child. So when I outgrew that bed and needed a new bed, my dad like built me a whole bed and then put a big canopy at the top so that I still had the same like enclosed feeling. And it was lovely. It was a really small accommodation that helped me to sleep better. It meant that at night time I wasn't having to drag all my stuff off my bed and take it all under with me. You know, it was just a very small thing that made me really happy and really made it easier for me to sleep, feel safer while I was asleep, not wake up as much in the night, you know, all of that stuff. You know, I think a lot of autistic kids could be made much happier and have their lives made much easier with very small accommodations, but it is difficult to figure out what those accommodations can be. You gotta pay a lot of attention to your kid, and that can be hard when you've got work or you've got other kids or you know, people have a lot of stuff going on. I'm not trying to say that you're not paying enough attention to your kid. Not even effort so much as just attention and observation really, to figure out how you can make it a little bit easier and implement some accommodations for your kid. Absolutely top notch. I don't have a lead in for this next one, but encourage, don't demand social interaction. I think that it's one of the things that annoys me the most about a lot of stuff to do with like autism organisations and charities and things like that, is that there's sort of this demand to interact. We can put you in these groups and we can send you here and we can take you there. And like a lot of autistic people that I know in real life got sent to all sorts of youth clubs and stuff with other autistic people. And it can seem like a great thing. I get why you're doing it. It's this whole like, oh, well, they'll have the chance to make friends, they'll have the chance to interact. I get it. But as the child who was quite often in these social situations where like I went to youth group for like years, like youth club on a Saturday, hated it, I didn't want to go, but my parents forced me to socialise, to make friends, but I didn't want to go. So once I got there, I was like, okay, computer room, here I go. And every now and again I'd get bored and like go and do some arts or go into the dance hall, or, you know, every now and again I did socialise, but for the most part I just sat on the fucking computer or went and did art on my own because I didn't want to be there. So it didn't have in any way this positive effect that everyone was expecting it to. And I think that'll be the case with most forced interaction. If you're just forcing me to be around someone, I don't really want to be around them. And I think that applies to autistic children. It totally applied to me when I was like in speech therapies and stuff with like big groups. I just wouldn't interact. Whereas when I got to go to like, I think honestly the first time that I genuinely got to choose my social interaction was probably the first time I went to Comic-Con in 2011, 2012-ish. We went to Wales Comic-Con with my dad. But that was like, my dad told me after that day that he was really proud of me because I'd asked questions in front of like maybe 100 people. It wasn't very big at the time, but I'd like stood up and asked a celebrity a question with all these people looking at me, and I'd just walked up to people and be like, can I get a picture? This is so cool, and just spoke to people. And like my dad was like, I'm so proud of you. That's the first time I've ever seen you do that. Because I got to choose the social interaction. I got to choose to be around people that I felt would be accepting of me, that people that I felt I belonged with, you know, so on and so forth. And I think that's very much the case with children too. Like, it might be really difficult, but finding things your kid actually wants to do that includes social situations instead of demanding that they do it, I think is going to have a much higher like turnout rate of positivity. You know, it's going to have an actual good effect. You know, being forced into dance classes as a kid, I didn't interact with anyone. But when I got to go to drama classes, I spoke to people, and I was still pretty unpopular, but I did it, you know? And it's things like that, like, find out what your kid's interested in, find out something that they'll actually enjoy and take them to it and suggest it to them. Don't just be demanding that they socialise and expecting them to do it. And that goes for like smaller interactions too, but that sort of leads me into my next point, which is to interact on their terms too. Now, I understand that there's certain expectations in society and in culture and in the world, and especially for those of us like myself that have like lower support needs, we're expected to learn them and figure them out. You know, I'd love it if every autistic person could just completely be themselves and never have to give in to any sort of societal pressure, but chances are we're going to at some point. So understand that if your kid's gonna have to do that for you, sometimes you should be interacting with your child how they want to interact as well. Like for me personally, my special interests have always been Doctor Who and Lord of the Rings. And some of my absolute favourite childhood memories are watching Doctor Who with my mum. And she didn't want to. Like lots of my favourite childhood memories and like memories from my teen years are when my mum would watch things with me and I'd you know, they were my special interest and I was getting to share it, and she'd ask questions about it because she didn't understand the plot most of the time. But you know, there was this like, that was my favourite type of interaction because it centred around a special interest. I felt like I had something to say for a change. I wasn't just having to mask and pretend to be someone. I actually could be myself and engage with my special interest while engaging with my mum. And as an adult, I can recognise that that's not how most people really probably did that. But it was lovely, you know? It was really nice to have her interact with me on my terms like that. And I think it's absolutely vital that everyone gets to experience that, autistic or not. I think everyone should get the chance to like interact with people on their level, if that makes sense. And to translate that into like what you would do with an autistic kid, I guess, that they're going to have special interests, they're going to have things that they do, you know? Going from online examples that I've seen a girl that really likes to organise cups. Organise some fucking cups with her. Get her some nice cups to organise. Ask like, oh, well, what order do they need to be organised and how are we doing it? How do you organise them? Take interest in what they're interested in is what I'm trying to say, I think. Let your kid feel interesting, like they're teaching you something and like you like them. You know, I'm sure you are, don't get me wrong. But I think that for me personally, growing up, so many of the things that I did and the ways that I were very much like, okay, like we accept that you are like that, but you need to not because it's weird. And now I'm having to relearn all those things about myself and accept who I am and do it all as an adult. When you could just skip your kid having to go through that by allowing them to feel like that as a kid. Allow them to know that like, yeah, this might be seen as a bit odd. Maybe don't tell everyone about it. But in this house, it's a great thing that you enjoy and that's fine. You know, it should be a safe place. You should be a safe person for them. You know, and if they're anything like me, they're probably going to be more willing to interact with you on your terms next time you need them to. But my final point is that you don't need to understand it to accept it. I think, like, from what I've seen in, like, the autism parent circles, there's a lot of striving to understand their child and understand why they're like this and understand why they do that. And if you're not autistic, and let's face it, maybe you are, because it does tend to run in the family kind of thing, but if you're not autistic, you're never going to understand what it is to be autistic. You can gain a better understanding, and I encourage you to do so, but you're never going to understand what it is to be autistic. So I don't see the point in constantly striving for, you know, gain an understanding, which you're obviously doing, but you're never going to get it completely, you know? And that's fine. That's absolutely okay. You don't need to. But what you do need to do is accept that and accept the autistic child or the autistic person, the autistic adult. Accept them for what they are. Everyone's got negatives. Everybody's got flaws. And all too often, I feel like, especially for like high support need autistic children, they're so overlooked in the positives that they have and the things that they can do. And that's not fair. That's really shitty. You know, you might not ever understand every reason that your kid has a meltdown, but you can accept that it happens sometimes and accept your child regardless of it and just support them and encourage them and love them. So, yeah, that's what I had to say. I do feel a bit awkward talking about any sort of parenting when I'm not a parent. It's very much like, well, I don't know anything. Which is why I've tried as much as I can to base it around my experiences from childhood and what I wish my parents had done and the like, all that stuff that I said at the start. I'm also obviously basing it on like shit that I've seen online and the hypothetical situations and parents. So I'm not saying like that you don't love your kid or whatever. It's just I've just got a camera and I've got to talk to something. So I'm saying you, but I don't know your situation. So don't take any like implications from me, please. My mouth is so dry, it is so hot. I'm going to go. But if you're autistic or the parent of an autistic child or interested in autism, you can follow me. I've got a shit ton of videos about autism at this point. I pump them out twice a week. I've got links below, so like Instagram and stuff. I'm trying to do something out here. I just spat even though my mouth's dry, so I'm definitely going now. But whoever you are, wherever you are, I hope you're having a lovely morning, evening, day, afternoon, week, month, year, and I'll see you again in a few days.